We're here today interviewing Joseph Spataro, a lifelong Monmouth Junction resident. He is 96 years old. It's July 10, 2013. Here in attendance at Mr. Spataro's home in Monmouth Junction on Ridge Road are Joe Spataro, Lou Schwartz, longtime township resident and friend of Joe's, Steele Leadham, township historian, Randy Marsola, South Brunswick Township librarian and interviewer, and Brett Page, South Brunswick library assistant. So, welcome, Joe, and thank you for being here.
Thank you very kindly for
Thank you for inviting us in.
Well, we'll see how it goes.
Okay, so I'm going to begin with a series of questions, and you can elaborate and answer them how you like. First of all, we'll start off with the basics. Where and when were you born?
I was born on Major Road, which is in a home that was opposite the first high school built here in December of 1916. And I remember when I was about 3 years old, I would be playing in the road because the road wasn't paved then and there weren't many cars. And when I was about, I would say about 4 years old, 3 to 4 years old, my father bought an acre of land on Highway 130, which is now George's Road.
Okay.
And we built a house there. And there, in that home, we had inside plumbing. And we had a central heating system, which was, those days, a little improvement over what we had.
That was advanced for the day.
And as a kid, I remember my sister and I were the last ones in the last load to go to the new home. And obviously we moved by horse and wagon those days.
Okay.
And as I said, Major Road wasn't paved, and I don't think Kingston Lane was even paved then. But I remember on the last load, my sister and I, my father, and the man driving a horse, and the pig were on the were on the wagon, and that was went to the new home.
So that was the beginning.
Yeah.
Okay, that's great. And describe your family.
Well, as I look back over the years, at my stage in life, I have a lot of time to think and be thankful for what I've had and haven't had. But I'm very happy that I had a nice family. We were poor then, but everybody else was poor. And but we had a nice home, we had clean bed, always had something to eat. Don't ask me how my parents did it, but we always had something to eat. And in the summertime, my father was a laborer, but he'd come home from work and he would plant in the summertime 150 tomato plants and 75 pepper plants, carrots, beets. We had something to eat during the winter.
So all those things were canned.
All of my mother, I don't know how my mother did it. She had, we were 6 children, 4 boys and 2 girls. And my mother washed on the washboard every Monday morning. And obviously when canning season came, she canned tomatoes, canned pears, canned peaches. And there was a lot of work those days. And I never heard them complain once. Never. We did have, when we moved over to this other place, we did have maybe 12, 14, 15 chickens, and we would have eggs. And there were no cars those days. And we went to church, we walked to church. And
about how far was it?
Well, we lived where Pierre's is now.
Okay.
My father built the house a little bit further down from that, and Pierre tore it down to expand his parking lot. Mm-hmm. And from there, we used to have to walk to the Monmouth Junction St. Cecilia's, the old church, where it was approximately across from the municipal building.
Okay.
So we'd say it's close to a mile.
Yeah, it's a good walk.
And then I was about 4 years old, and I started school in Dayton. And I walked 8 years to Dayton School from there. There were no buses, there was no basketball, there was no football. The teacher took you outside and you did a little gymnastics.
Some calisthenics.
And then from the elementary school, the kids here in Monmouth Junction went to Princeton High. But over there on the 130 side, Dayton and Deans, we went to New Brunswick High School.
Okay.
And that was a sad situation because those days, New Brunswick High School was the only school in the area. Franklin Township didn't have a high school. Holland Park didn't have a high school. East Brunswick didn't have a high school. East Brunswick didn't have a high school. South Brunswick didn't have a high school. Everybody went to New Brunswick.
And how long would that take you to get to New Brunswick High School?
Well, it didn't take long because the bus would pick us up.
Oh, you took a bus, okay.
And it would take maybe a half hour because on the bus that I was on, we cut down Dean's Lane, went through, came back out Davison's Mills, and pick up a lot of kids that way. But it was, at that particular time, New Brunswick High School was a good school, had a lot of curriculum. They were teaching German, they were teaching French, they were teaching everything. But I don't think I ever had lunch in the lunchroom once. Ate my lunch standing up in the hall. They had counters all around the hall. You stand up there and eat your lunch.
Huh. So you didn't have a sit-down lunch? You just...
No, it was just too crowded.
Okay.
But they had very good football teams because kids from all over the county.
Right, big pool.
Big in sports, yeah, they did well.
Oh, that's great. Well, my next question is, where were your parents born and why did they choose to come to South Brunswick?
Well, that's an interesting story. My mother came here at 18 years of age. My father came here when he was around 20 or so. He wound up out in Colorado working on a railroad. But he had 4 brothers, and they were all in the city. And they tried to figure out what he's doing out in Colorado. They got him back to the city. Well, he married my mother, and they lived on the Lower East Side. And there was this garbage strike in New York City. They say the strike, garbage was packed 10 feet high. My father said, I can't live in this. So they came out to Monmouth Junction.
They came from the city, okay.
And we used to sit around the dinner table, and the families ate together those days. We had dinner every night, and we all sat in the same seat, and we all did the same thing. And sometimes after dinner, we'd sit around and talk, and I always used to say to my mother, thank God Pop came to the country. Because I don't think I would have survived in New York.
This is a real countryside, even more so.
Well,
you can still see it. I mean, I see the fields out there, and it looks very rural.
If you want to expand on that a little bit, when I was a kid, there was nothing here but farms. In Dayton, you had Anderson, Bindy's, Hunkley's, the Duncans, the Farr Farm, Charlie Cox, Charlie Richter, and in Monmouth Junction you had the Landises, you had the Flood, you had the Skanks, you had Bobco's, and the Landis, I mentioned Landis. There was nothing but farms. Everything, when I was a kid, was nothing but potatoes, corn, and wheat and rye. That's all. But it's changed a lot. I mean, you can tell it's not farms today. This farmland here is farmed because that land is owned by the research center, and they let a man from Hamilton Township farm it.
Okay.
But he knows what he's doing. He does a good job of it.
Okay. Okay.
But there's not much farm in South Brunswick anymore.
There's a
we
few.
used to have a couple dairy farms, and there were a lot of poultry farms that raised eggs.
Yeah, I heard about that.
And everything's gone.
Yeah, I heard about the poultry farms. Other question I had is, were your parents born in this country?
No, my parents both came from Italy.
They came from Italy.
Yeah.
Okay.
And they came in the late 1800s, early 1900s. I've got a lot of, like I say, I've got a lot of notebooks and boxes around and mother's citizenship papers and all this sort of stuff. I'll never get to put it together in order, but I keep trying, you know.
Right, right.
But they both came from Europe, and we've got them registered in Ellis Island.
At Ellis, okay.
Because they came through Ellis Island.
Right, right, right. Well, did you keep in touch, or did your parents keep in touch with the family back home in Italy?
Well, let me tell you something. My mother was a very educated woman. My father, he just got by. But my mother was a very educated woman. She went to a lot of schooling with the nuns in Italy. And she corresponded. But also, at that time, there were a lot of Italian people in Dean's Lane and some in Monmouth Junction. They couldn't read or write. They would get a letter from Italy, they would call my mother. My mother would go there, she'd read the letter to them, and she'd write back as to what they told her to write.
So she knew all the news.
Yeah. When the war was over, or during the war, my mother's mother passed away. And when we came back from service, us boys, we said to my mother, you want to go back to see what happened over there? Because she owned a home there. And she said, look, she says, America is my home. That's exactly what she said. America is my home. I got married here, I had my children here, you all went to service. I don't want to go back. And she didn't. It cost her $500 to give the house away. She went to the Italian consulate in Trenton, and they charged her $500 to give the house away. But she was very happy because she gave it to an orphanage.
She gave her the house back in Italy. She gave that away. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. So I'm assuming that you spoke English and Italian in your house.
We all spoke a little Italian when my parents were alive. We managed to get by. You know, we weren't that fluent in it, but we could speak enough to. But my mother did well. My mother could read an English newspaper. She said to me, you got more education than me, why can't you read the Italian paper? I said, I don't know.
So did they tell any stories, or do you know any stories from the old country, from Italy?
Well, the only thing that I remember, she used to talk about Mount Vesuvius erupting a lot.
Really?
Yeah.
So she was right near the volcano?
Yeah.
Wow,
And,
that's interesting, that's dramatic.
yeah, and of course she used to talk about some of the conditions there, you know. But she had a sister and a brother, and they were both here. And why I say I've had a nice life is I knew all my uncles. I knew my father's brothers. I knew his children. It was really nice those days. It was family, you know. And we lived in the country, and they all used to come out and visit us.
That's great. So you were talking about your house that you grew up in. You mentioned that you had plumbing and you had electricity.
That when my father built that other house.
And also, did you have so if you had electricity and plumbing and the heating, what was the heating in your house?
In those days, the central heating was a big air furnace in the center of the house, and you hope and prayed some of the heat got upstairs. It was an improvement over having just a kitchen stove,
right.
But it wasn't that great, you know.
So yours sounded a little bit more advanced, because I heard stories where the heat in the house is only supplied by the stove, like you were saying, and it was cold
that's
upstairs.
the way it was in the house where I was born.
Mm-hmm.
But over here they had they used to call them a hot air heater. That's all it was. You could burn coal in it, you know, and it would just throw up some heat. If you got 15 feet away from it,
it was cold.
Temperature was different.
Well, for example, did the children have their own rooms, or did they all sleep together? How did that work?
we were 4 boys,
Uh-huh.
and we had a bedroom. My 2 sisters had a bedroom, and my mother and father had a room. It was only a 3-bedroom house.
Okay. Okay, so you mentioned that you had a garden. You had all types of things growing there.
My father was, I had to give him a lot of credit. He kept us fed.
And you had chickens, and you had pigs, and any other.
Well, after that pig that we brought over was gone, that was the end of the pigs.
It was just that one, huh?